All right, it is 7 o'clock and we'll bring the meeting to order. I'm Don Berube, 135 River Road.
Mike Wayne, Select Board Rep.
Development Director.
I'm gonna say it all night. David Glacier, 80, Tim McDaniel, 117 Pedro.
Michael Lawton, 3 Ace Drive.
All right. Well, we get no minor modifications or conceptual consultations, so we're gonna move right into public hearings. Consideration of placing the following amendments to the zoning ordinance on the town warrant. First one is to amend the temporary structures and uses under section 302 and add section 7.27. Tell us about this.
Sure. So we'll pick each of these A through G one by one.
Yep.
I can explain them and then we can open a public hearing for each one as we go.
Sounds
That
good.
plan?
Yep.
Okie dokie. So temporary structures and uses. This one was located in the definition section, but we felt that it was more than a definition. So I tried to take out more of the actual policy parts of it and remove that into its own section as 7.27. I left what I felt was a reasonable definition, which is just structures and uses shall be limited to 180 consecutive days and 180 days of the calendar year. Temporary structures include tents, fabric shelters, portable shelters, construction trailers during permitted construction, and similar structures. So that's kind of what we're left with for a definition. I don't know if there's any thoughts as to strengthening that as an actual definition. And then the rest of it, I just moved into 7.27. I'm happy to take advice.
So we're not really changing anything, we're just
Moving it around.
moving it around.
Yeah, but no policy changes.
What is that?
We have this 7. Yeah, it's.
So it's gonna be, that's on the back. Let's just put a photo. Unfortunately, the red came out very light gray. I can also pull things up on the screen.
You don't print in color.
We,
That's expensive.
well, we don't have a color printer. There's one in the building, I think.
Well, okay, and anything, I'm gonna open it to the public, if anybody's got any comments on this first proposed amendment. Seeing none, I'm gonna close the public hearing.
180 consecutive days and 180 days, like that redundant.
I think it means that you can't just do it like 3 days on, 1 day off. Like you can't just have it on and off constantly. Like you're
I
capped
also
at
say
100.
you can't go from day 1 to day 180, take it down, put it up on 182, and start the clock over again.
Right.
Why can't it just be 180 consecutive?
Because if you did 180, took it down, then put it back up on day 182, you could start the clock. So you could, if it's a tent, you could do that in perpetuity.
I'll just tell them I took it down yesterday.
Also,
Yeah.
So
So if
there's 2 items in section 727. Do you want to cover them both at the same time?
yeah, I think they really go together because we're
Yeah.
moving the info from one section.
One
and
section
putting
to
it
the
in
other
here
section.
with
Yeah,
all
that's what we're
three.
talking.
So tonight, I guess I should give a little more background. This is the first public hearing for these amendments. So anything that we didn't make any changes on, you're comfortable with, you can vote this evening if you want to add them to the warrant. Anything that we make any substantial changes on, we'll push to a second public hearing, which will be on February 1st. And then make a vote that time. So if you want to wait and do them all on February 1st, you can, or you can push some of these to the warrant now that you're good with.
Do it now.
Yeah, I'm good.
Did you close the public hearing?
I did.
Am I voting?
You are not. If Jonathan shows up, you will be, but I want to keep an odd number. We'd hate to have a tie here, though.
I'm such a contingency.
So can I make a motion to accept proposed amendment A and add it to the town warrant? Is that appropriately worded?
Yeah, I think you would move it to the town warrant.
Okay.
I'll second it.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, let's go. What's that? Go to,
All right,
All right.
we got one done.
one's down, look at that. All right. We'd love to hear your comments.
Let's do our net here to join us for a later one. I'm just gonna let.
Okay.
Proposed amendment B. Again, I don't see this as a change in policy. It's more of a cleanup item. It appears in multiple areas in the table of use regulations. And the one under principal uses for public and institutional B, which is number 12, home-based daycare. We felt that there couldn't be a home-based daycare that's a public and institutional use as opposed to residential, because home is in the name.
This one came up, right? There was like,
Well,
or was this just you reviewing?
people have asked about daycares when you start looking through the table of uses, and it appears like 4 or 5 different ways under different categories.
But I mean, you could have a business could have a daycare in it. It wouldn't be a home-based daycare.
Right, and that would fall
The
under,
different section.
we have accessory uses would be a child daycare center, under residential and non-residential.
Welcome, Jonathan.
Sorry.
No problem.
Typical.
Yeah, we know you, coaching. Jeff, you are now voted. You gotta keep the number odd here, so he couldn't vote for you guys.
Yeah, so all the places where the daycare appears, so we have public and institutional child daycare center, so that's a typical daycare center, just as a business. And then there's B12, which is home-based daycare, which is under public and institutional, so that's just nonsensical to me.
Yeah.
And then you also have under accessory uses, you have a home-based daycare as accessory to a residence. So that's, you have your home, but in your home, you have a home-based daycare. Right, and then accessory for residential and non-residential as child daycare center. So I think we have all the bases covered without this one.
So again, it's just cleaning up.
Yes.
Anybody got any comments? I'll open this to the public. If anybody's got any comment on our cleanup of home-based daycare. Not seeing any, I'll close the public hearing. Anybody got any other comment, or would entertain a motion to move it to the,
Would make it a motion to accept proposed amendment B and move it to the town warrant.
Second.
all those in favor? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? There we go. You're just counting right through them.
Proposed amendment C is amendments to the floodplain districts, and these amendments came to us from the staff at the, changing their name, is it OSI now, the Office of Strategic Initiatives, or the state agency that manages these, like, they've changed their names like 3 times in my short career. So, these amendments came directly from them in order to help us maintain compliance with the National Floodplain Insurance Program, the flood insurance program. So these comes directly to us from the experts.
Anybody any questions? All right, I will open this to the public. If anybody's got any questions or comments on the floodplain changes? All right, seeing none, I will close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to amend section 10.02 floodplain F district as printed
To move into the warrant.
and move it to the warrant.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Mhm. D,
See, I'd say it's the first one that's actually proposing a policy change. This is in regard to accessory dwelling units, also known as in-law apartments. We get a lot of requests for these in our office. There's a lot of interest with the housing crunch right now, or people looking to find places for their aging relatives to be close to them. And we've had a lot of requests for detached units. Right now, we only allow them to be attached to a single family dwelling. A lot of the surrounding communities do allow detached. And so this proposal would allow detached accessory dwelling units by a conditional use permit. So they would still come before, the planning board, and show that they meet the criteria, to allow that. Currently, they would have to go to the zoning board of adjustment and get a variance. It's more of a difficult challenge and an obstacle to allowing this.
Why is that more?
There is a legal standard to get a variance that has to be met, showing that there's a hardship, and something specific about that lot. A specific hardship. So that is a higher legal standard, a threshold that has to be met.
You can put conditions on the variance saying it can't be X, Y, Z.
You be careful with your language, so it wouldn't be a variance anymore, it would be a
Right.
conditional use permit.
Conditional use permit.
And so then they would have to meet the conditional use permit criteria, which are in 12.02. So they would have to meet the criteria that the use is authorized. That it will comply with the requirements, it will not endanger public health or safety, compatible with the neighborhood, not have an adverse impact on highway or pedestrian safety, not have an adverse impact on natural resources, and adequately serviced by public utilities and facilities. So you would just be assessing that it's appropriate in that location, basically, and not going to cause any harm. So you can see in the table of uses under accessory dwelling unit, I added A and B. Attached is already permitted in every district, so I added detached with a conditional use permit in all the districts. And then in the definition of accessory dwelling unit, I made a change because our definition said that it was attached. So I changed it and said that it's subordinate and within or attached to a single family dwelling or is located in a detached structure. And then the same requirements that we required for the attached ADU should be the same that would be required for the detached, the same size restrictions that they would have to be
So it's 800 square feet.
of habitable space. So that excludes hallways, bathrooms, laundry rooms, closets.
So I have a question just out of like a example.
Yeah.
So someone builds a detached garage and they put in a lower portion that's got like a bathroom, but the top portion becomes their habitable space. Like I could see a scenario where it's great, it becomes potentially a greater footprint than 800 square feet, right? 20
So-
feet by 40 feet, right?
So the
If there's like a double car garage or a triple car garage.
Yeah, it could be a bigger footprint, but the living space that's actually for the ADU, so that's the bedroom, the kitchen, the living room. That space can't be more than 800 square feet. You could have a 1,000 square foot storage room attached to it,
Okay.
but it's the actual living habitable space that counts towards the limit.
Which is gonna limit number of bedrooms.
Right. Understood.
In effect, yeah, we don't actually have a limit on the number of bedrooms, but
but square
many?
footage.
however many you can fit in 800 square feet.
You know, really big walk-in closet.
I guess my question to that is like it's a little bit easier when it's an attached for the living space and then like there could be a shared bathroom or whatever. I'm just trying to figure out like you almost have to have a dedicated bathroom for that space, right?
Right. Yeah, they generally do.
Yeah, that would be, I mean,
It
yeah.
actually has to. It has to because
By
it
the
has to
requirement.
provide sleeping, eating, cooking, and sanitation. So yeah, you have to have all four components.
I was missing
Yeah,
the one section under B, which addresses what my concern was. So there's already a requirement for it being attached to the septic and adequate capacity to add to the number of additional. That was my concern is.
ADU counts as like rooms regardless of how many bedrooms it is. But in septic terms, that's really two. There's no such thing as a half. So basically, however many bedrooms you have in the main house, you add two, and you have to have that capacity. You don't actually have to install it, though. You just have to have a plan approved that allows for that capacity. If yours fails, then you're ready to go to install the new one.
Okay.
And you've proven that it can fit on your lot if necessary.
What was the reason that we didn't allow it?
Oh no.
And you say you get a lot of requested.
I had 3 in 2 weeks.
And your response is they're not allowed.
And I explained to them the variance process and give them the application. Some of them, few of them have been existing detached garage with finished space above that they'd like to make into an apartment. So they wouldn't even be adding more footprint. It's already sitting there on their
Yeah.
lot.
Okay, about my garage. I have a game room, player uses bathroom, but I didn't put a stove in there just for that reason, because I don't want anybody living.
Yeah, there's a lot of like in-law suites that people are wanting to have in that scenario.
Yeah. This is gonna sound differently than I intended. I'm wondering why we would make a policy change necessarily. Like, is there a groundswell from the public? Like,
not saying we shouldn't do it, but let me be clear, that's not.
Yeah, no,
I'm
the
just saying-
reason I have brought it up is because I get frequent questions about it from the public, and I reviewed policies of surrounding communities and found that a lot of them allow them detached.
It's also, we're allowing them to build it attached to their house, not just a permit. So I don't see any reason why you wouldn't. Air barrier between them and their in-laws.
They're still gonna have to,
For everyone's health.
I think I would,
they're still gonna have to come before the board for the.
yeah, but I would suspect that it's not so much in-laws as renters.
That hasn't been the requests I've been seeing.
Fair enough.
Although perhaps as times change, the current situation, they have somebody elderly that needs it, and maybe when they move on, maybe they would open it up to renters. But that's not the reason people are coming to us wanting to build them.
Right. Okay.
I mean, one of the things with being an accessory dwelling unit, so the 800 square feet is gonna limit, the family with, more children and, it's gonna be a couple. It might be, they get their kid out there now, but
I think there's a lot more scenarios where people already have the finished garage, like the garage in a finished area, and now they're just wanting to convert it.
Yeah.
I had that exact scenario this week. So.
anything else from the board, from the public? All right, anybody from the public? Questions, comments about accessory dwelling units? Detached accessory dwelling units? All right, seeing none, I will close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to add the detached to the attached as accessory dwelling units under section 5.11, accessory uses A.6a and B, and to amend section 7.04 to allow detached ADUs and to add it to the warrant.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Moving on to E.
Most amendment E is 7.10 radio TV tower or antenna and personal wireless service facilities. I made a couple changes. I tried to keep it as simple as possible. So where we said under 2A, the height limitations, where it said shall not exceed, it previously said 90 feet. I changed that to 190 feet. And again, where it referenced 90, I changed it to 190. And then in all of these sections in B, where it talked about stealth technologies, I added the words to the extent feasible. So I'm definitely open to doing more work on this. I felt that the words to the extent feasible open and helps us recognize that we would prefer to see stealth technology whenever it's appropriate and possible, and leaves the door open if it just doesn't make sense.
That was my only thing when you go back to the previous issue of the cell tower. It might be feasible to put fake leaves on a cell phone tower that's 190 feet, but it wasn't reasonable. It would look stupid. And so I wanted to know if that covered the idea that like we can have some common sense around it is stealth technology in name only. So as long as the feasible covers that argument for me, I'm fine with it.
I think the other thing is stealth versus camouflage are two different things, right? So stealth was the more of the monopole type and utilizing that, and then the camouflage was adding the coverage to it to make it look like a artificial tree. But I would agree with what
Yeah,
you
if you think that wording covers what I just laid out, that like you can use common sense.
That was my intent, but I'm open to hearing what you all think.
I can't think of a better word. I'm just making sure that that's what it's roughly what you
I actually think to the extent feasible doesn't do the same thing.
Do you have a better word? I don't know. I know, it's just trying to.
Probably what Kip said.
Could you say at the discretion of the planning board? Like, is there a way to make it just explicit? Instead of trying to hope a word covers it, can we just make it explicit?
I mean, just put a reasonable standard in. But that's gonna be in the deference to the board.
Reasonable?
So to the extent reasonable,
So I'm thinking about a person that's putting together an application. To the board.
Yeah.
Like, what is that? How do they know what that means? What's reasonable?
I agree, and I would say I'm gonna do whatever is the least costly option of whatever I'm gonna say. And not necessarily take into account. But I don't know how you encapsulate,
because you know, if you have a 190-foot tower that's 100 feet taller than the tree line, putting limbs on it is not effective. If it's 10 feet above the tree line, limbs might be effective.
Trying to achieve the actual purpose of camouflage or gun. You're not trying to do it in name only, you're trying to actually achieve the purpose of the thing.
Yeah.
Put that in words.
Trying.
well, you're almost basically now limiting it to a certain threshold. Like if it exceeds a certain threshold, we're willing to basically say we would consider waiving that, right?
Maybe feasible is a good word.
Jerry was on all along.
If you put yourself,
So
Adam's hypothetical makes me think feasible is a better term. I'm not quite sold yet, but you're in their shoes. You're gonna say, what can I do to camouflage this thing? And come up with a plan. And then I think the board would be able to say, what other options are there if we weren't satisfied with it? And they'd be like, oh, no, there's nothing we could do, or, oh, here's the other thing we could do. To me,
Like, is it feasible to camouflage a tower that is 100 feet above the canopy? It's not feasible. You can't camouflage.
so could you put a limitation like in there, maybe 20 feet above the existing tree canopy, or 30 feet?
well, the 100 feet example, that proposal, what they said is they were gonna paint it. That was their attempt to camouflage it. Instead of it being whatever, it was gonna be a gray to blend in with the sky. So I think the answer is yes. How camouflage that is a different question.
You don't usually see bright red towers sticking up there.
Right.
Either. They're usually a nice metal galvanized gray.
I'm almost saying leaning back towards that is sufficient to the extent feasible. That's added in there. I can't really think of any other way to.
But it is feasible, it's just a matter of, yeah, we can put branches on a 190-foot tower.
It's whether or not it's effective.
Right.
Yeah, it would be camouflaged if you were doing that.
But it is
But-
feasible.
Yeah, I mean, I'm back to the example that David just gave. Which is if we leave it as to the extent feasible, they're gonna come in, they're gonna try to do something to satisfy either stealth technology or the camouflaging. And if we feel that that's not feasible enough, then we would say, okay, what other options would there be?
So what if you said, shall employ stealth technology? Like
I guess what
except where it's not feasible. So there's a preference to camouflage, and if they came in and said, we're not gonna do that, we would be saying, well, why? Just to invert it. It might be too cute, though.
Well,
I would
we
think-
need to work on,
Yeah, and I have sent it to, town council and haven't heard back yet, so I
Mhm.
would wanna wait to get here from him, but it's good to workshop it as much as we can
Yeah.
at this point too.
I had a different question. That's okay. So, section B.
Yeah.
Sorry, section A,
Yeah, general,
the height limitation.
yeah.
The second to last sentence, I think, the intent to serve a large area with one tall installation will not be accepted as justification for the height. That feels problematic to me, just that sentence. Second to last. So if somebody comes in with 250 feet
Mhm.
and just harkening back to our experience, the answer is like, why? And it's, well, that's what it's gonna take to get, and it's like, well, okay, we have, on the one hand, it says the minimum necessary in order to transmit and receive commercially feasible. So like they're saying, this is what's commercially feasible. On the other hand, our next sentence says, yeah, that's not a good enough justification. So I feel like that sentence should go.
And then the following one goes with it though.
I would leave that.
Yeah. You're almost in essence saying, like, it. By keeping that second, you're saying that that is the preferred anyways.
Yeah, and the sentence before that, one I want to strike also, emphasize, the height of any structure will be the minimum necessary. So we're expressing a preference for smaller towers. Then you're saying with a commercial viability limit. Okay, that to me makes sense. Skip the next sentence and say, hey, by the way, multiple minimum height towers are really what we're after here. To me, that's the right policy expression that the town seems to want without the complication that that one sentence does to us.
Susan, I'm trying to remember, is the 190 foot maximum, do you need a conditional use permit for that, or is it just,
The conditional use permit is for any.
so?
Right, so they need a CUP and a waiver. As, so like the last tower.
Yeah, they have the waiver for the height and the CP is
The
kind of
whole
overall
application.
for any.
Still large and on policy. Not be accepted as justification for height. So could that apply, would that apply? When I read that, I thought that that applied to like 190 foot tower. To justify a 190 foot tower, like that's the maximum that you could have. So I don't know, I think if we see applications that are gonna be 190 feet, but, is this implying for towers that are taller than 190 feet?
It sounds like it, kind of, but if you're trying to justify height, it seems like you would maybe be justifying a waiver. Is that what you mean?
Well, no, I'm trying to understand if you have to justify 190 feet. If someone provided a tower that's 190 feet, it's gonna serve a whole, like what we just had.
So even though, so it says it can't exceed 190 feet, but then it does go on and say that it needs to be the minimum necessary. So they still have to justify that it's the minimum necessary.
For any height,
Yeah.
whether it be 190 or 50 or something bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think you're right. If you take that, if you raise the height limitation,
That's what
the
we're.
policy changes. If a tower, comes in, expect that.
It does still say though that it has to be the minimum necessary.
So that would be a qualifier.
Isn't that kind of what we want though? Like we want a tower to serve as much area as it can easy.
Well, I'm not sure. So this would be interesting because this goes to the voters, right? They would, my personal view is this is a provision that should have been amended before or earlier, right? And it would have been helpful to get a cell tower done. If, and I don't know, can't recall, but if it seemed, for my memory serves, that like a cell tower of some height is really going to be required, having a limitation on it that doesn't make that possible is a problem for the town, right? If we want cell phone coverage, but we're not willing to build it the height required, we're not, like, those two things are incompatible. So what we, in my view, what we should do is say, if this is the height, I mean, talk to the experts, if this is actually the height that's going to be required in this area, we need to change the law. Like, simple as that. And the voters can decide what they want to do, you know?
I have one other question. Have we seen any input from that committee that was formed? Or
They haven't met recently because we've been waiting for.
We're waiting for the RFP to come back,
so there is,
study,
okay, so there,
and to my knowledge, we have 2 applicants.
Okay, last I heard there was one.
One,
Maybe there's
one
another.
came in today.
Right.
So,
The deadline
and
is
then-
Monday.
right,
because I'd just be curious of trying to incorporate any findings from that committee that we may be overlooking that,
Yeah,
Should
exactly.
be.
And said, you only need 50-foot towers.
Right.
right?
I
And
think
then we
that's,
said, oh, crap, we changed the law. Yeah, I mean, it's.
That-
reasonable.
was the intended timeline of
yeah.
events originally. We've had done a first round RFP and didn't get any suitable responses. So that's late and we had to release it again. So we were hoping to have that information, have the RF study done already. But last time planning board met, felt that you wanted to get something changed and everyone agreed that the 90 feet was unrealistic regardless. So
Yeah.
we wanted to at least change the real problematic parts of it. And then I suspect maybe there would be additional amendments after we get the results of the RF study, maybe.
Yeah, I was just curious what the time frame was. So the deadline's on Monday, and then when does we know when the committee meets again?
I'll probably need soon
we
after
have
to review.
scheduled.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's just a
That's just
That's
to
just an
select
study.
someone to do the
Yeah.
study.
study.
And there's also not funding for that currently, so.
Okay.
I mean, it might be found, but there is not money set aside for it.
And I mean, we do have some evidence that 190 feet is required. Right, this has been going on for years. No one has, to my knowledge, stepped up and said, we'll do it differently.
Well, part of the 190 feet is the highest you go in that height.
That's probably one. 5C, power construction. Letter C talks about the lighting, so the existing language says it shall not be artificially lighted unless required by the FAA or other authority. If lighting is required, the governing authority may review the lighting alternatives and approve the design that would cause the least disturbance to the surrounding views. And I added, or require that the tower be built at a lower height that would not require lighting. See, last time we talked, that seemed like the lighting was a key thing, that
Yeah.
up to 190 feet, but not if it has to be lit. So I think that language achieves that.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's,
because there's no height reference in there. So that's just a
Right,
lighting.
and I think depending on specific site considerations, it is possible the FAA could require a tower under 200 to be lit,
Stop Mountain.
maybe. Or maybe if the rules changed or
Right,
something in
right,
the future.
Yeah.
So that just kind of covers, right, I think there generally it's 200, but I think in extenuating circumstances, they may say you need a light on a tower that's less than that. So this is to protect against that.
Well, we'll see if the public's got anything to say. So I'm gonna open up this to the public. Anybody came to talk about cell tower?
Really?
Wow,
No one?
all right. See any, I will close the
Fill the room.
public hearing.
I have one more thing, like, I think if we adjust this language somehow to incorporate any new technology they may come out that doesn't necessarily fall into the stealth technology term. Because there's new generational stuff that's coming out as we speak, right? 5G was the next phase where it's smaller modules, smaller size towers and stuff. So my point is, I think we need to try to have language that stays ahead of where we are as of today, so that we're not getting ourselves into situations where, right? So I would just suggest, I don't know how we capture that, but I think we should try to incorporate some sort of language for new types of technology. Because that stealth technology relates to something specific to the larger cell tower.
Is that, are you saying like a preference for a monopole versus a lattice structure?
No,
That's like a.
Well, that's stealth, that's stealth technology.
So
right?
our definition for stealth facility slash stealth technology means something, a tower that's designed to look like a structure, such as flagpole, farm silo, ranger, forest fire watchtower, or artificial trees. So that's stealth is disguised to look like a different type of structure that you'd be expect to see in that landscape. And then we also have a definition for camouflage that's disguised, hidden part of an existing building or structure placed within an existing or proposed building or structure. So that's more.
But you're saying you want a preference for your stuff.
I would like to just say that we would like to encapsulate the future technology into this so that we're not limiting it on what's currently out there. Because what's currently out there is 4G, right? Or in some cases 5G, but what those towers are that came before us was 4G. So my point is, like, there could be something that's in the pipeline for some of those companies or cell phone companies that comes out that would be more preferential than going to a huge tower. And that's all that I'm saying is somehow we have to incorporate that so that it's at least being explored. Because otherwise they're just going to go with the least expensive option, right? Which may not necessarily be the best option.
I mean, if newer technology allows them to do lower poles, I think it would seem like that would be the lesser expensive. You know, and I mean, I think when they're putting stuff in, they're trying to stay on top of the technology because everybody's phones are going, everybody, you know.
Yep.
I mean, they're not
I
putting
mean-
up any 3G transmitters anymore.
Well, yeah, but like right now, there's nothing to force that issue. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like, what's to force them to stay up with the current technology?
I think.
Like they put up
Land.
they put up a tower and then it's like a certain past dated technology. Like coverage could be less, whereas something that comes in the future could have. That's all I'm saying. I think there's a way that we could put some language in there that addresses that. I'm thinking of like 5G right now. Like there are 5G options that are out there that don't require a huge cell tower. And I don't think that it's necessarily being explored.
I'm just trying to figure out where, how we can incorporate language like that.
I think it's adding something as simple as, um, I'm like reading through like where we address like the stealth technologies. I think that if you were to incorporate language to say, or other, I gotta think about it a little bit, whether that's the right place to put that in, because I feel like that stealth technology is specific to the tower itself.
Yeah.
And I'm addressing something that's completely separate than,
I also wonder if it's necessary for that to be included in an ordinance, or if their business practices are going to keep them putting up the most
They're not gonna
the
want to
latest
put up.
outdated
Full
technology.
technology.
Right. Yeah, I
I
don't,
don't,
the
yeah,
market.
I don't see it being an issue because it's, you know, the race of the better technology, faster, you know, everything is about the latest technology. So it's carrying the most data.
We also do have requirements for the removal of abandoned structures, so there's incentive to not build a tower for 3 years and then leave it there. They'd have to be responsible for taking it down if they needed to, so I think there already is incentive to stay on top of technology, but
Yeah.
anyone else have?
I was kind of
Thoughts
thinking
on
that in terms of the CUP itself. If there was something obviously better, I think we'd have a hard time being like, this meets the
Yeah, why are you
conditional
putting up
uses.
old
Why, yeah, why
technology?
would you do this? But you'd have to would require you to pick up on that, I guess.
Okay. So any consensus on that?
I mean, I guess we could have in there that it would employ latest technology.
Well, even that's tricky though.
Is
Like,
that,
what if we're on like a,
yeah,
because that's not.
We don't
what
want
they
to
were
be
proposing.
judging the latest technology.
Yeah.
yeah, I guess.
I might just. We can think about it for something. I don't have a specific recommendation now.
And then was there a consensus on the sentence that you wanted to remove into the intent to serve a large area with one tall installation will not be accepted as justification of height? Staying, going?
The other sentences. I don't know, do you read those last two sentences?
I thought we would keep the last one, because to say that we want smaller towers. That's preference.
so I think that's where I'm like getting caught up, because our preference is smaller towers. And smaller towers is what I'm referencing as far as like the newer generation of technology is going towards that smaller band radius, but having more modules out. Like if you go into a city, like that's why they have 5G, because they've put up more modules and a bigger footprint. It costs more money to do that. We're kind of saying, hey, we would want to have more smaller towers rather than bigger.
I
Right?
mean, would 150-foot towers really be better than 190-foot towers?
It's not even that, it's just the type of modules that they're putting in, so they're just smaller footprints, but more of them, like hundreds of them rather than.
My issue
It's-
with it is I'm not sure what a court will do interpreting that provision. If we need a cell phone tower, and whether it's going to be 190 feet or something else, it says you can do 190 feet, but don't tell me it has to be 190 feet if you're just trying to serve people. I don't even know what that means, right? Like, I don't know how an applicant is supposed to deal with that practically, right? So I think that's my perspective. It's like, in terms of a legal standard, that feels all over the map to me. We want small towers. We're gonna allow you to have a big one, but we want small ones. Oh, by the way, you can't justify a big one. Why would you justify a big one? Right, it just doesn't, I don't think it makes any sense. I think you
I
could
hear
say,
you.
we'll let you do a 190-foot tower, but we want smaller ones. So you need to show us that this is what's required. Right? If it's not required, you gotta do smaller ones. That's my point.
Consensus? Yes, cross it off.
People can disagree, that's fair.
I think we strike that second. Leave the last. I need to think more about where I was going with the additional, but I think you can incorporate that, what I was trying to get at, into that last sentence. To say minimum height towers or new generational technology would be preferred.
Thank you.
But I don't know if what I just said necessarily is what we want, because I don't want us to be sitting here trying to judge what is and isn't the next generation technology. So, but it's tough because, like, in that situation for the tower, it was a catch-22, because basically the vendors were saying, hey, we're not gonna put our coverage on that tower unless it meets this. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it gives you the right. I mean, that's where we're like in that
But we
catch-22.
put those restrictions on it. We told them what they had to cover,
I understand,
yeah,
right?
and
And they said, okay, we'll cover that,
with 190 foot.
but we're only putting it at that 100. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like it's back to David's point of, it's counterintuitive of what, like, we're saying we prefer the shorter, smaller towers, more of them, but the vendors are saying, hey, we're only gonna put it on this size tower to give you this coverage.
Yeah, I think, but that's the point. So how do you, the as amended, it does that. The way it's written now, I don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Right, but what we do know, right, so we've got RFPs out, we've gone through this process for 2 years. We know a company showed up and said, this is what's required. Well, our regulations make that extremely difficult. So, amending the language as Carrie's laid out, I think allows us to have a preference, a policy preference, but also meet what we know appears to be a standard. Now, that changes, it's flexible enough to say, yeah, you can go to that height, but if something lower is feasible, that's what we want, we can hold you to it. To me, the language works without that one sentence to get exactly the policy aims we're after.
Well, what's multiple minimum height towers? How many towers are? What if they came in and said, we need 100,
telephone.
we need 100 towers to.
Well, don't have a place to put it.
Very long way.
Yeah.
If we raise the height to 190, everyone will build 190 towers. Because there's no, except for cost, there's no incentive to go below that based on cell tower technology.
So the third to last sentence says, the height of any structure will be the minimum necessary in order to transmit and receive. We'll always do 190. What's the minimum necessary? So house next door? No, they're trying to reach the largest coverage area. And so if we raise it to 190, it will always be 190. So we should, to David's point, I think, remove any language that makes that nebulous. For just clarity of an applicant, for the public, we raise the height to 190. There will not be a single person come in here suggesting they want to build a 120-foot tower.
Unless they, just find that high enough peak where they can
Yeah, cost or
Yeah.
FAA lighting.
Like economics could play a role in some situations.
They could, but I think not knowing that industry. Just industry in general, if we allow 190 and cell phones,
They'll be,
they always work better when they're higher up because they reach higher places. Maybe I'm wrong, I'll try to quickly think of where I might be wrong there. They're always gonna build 190, and so we're gonna change that rule. We should eliminate all the language in this that throws confusion into the works. That's my opinion.
Is anyone speaking of being opposed to removing the second to last sentence, the intent to serve a large area with one tall installation will not be accepted as justification of height? Is anyone opposed to removing that?
the line going for that one, isn't it?
There, I got it. I got it. All right,
So we should come back to this in a second.
the first, but we need to have, I mean, that's our last chance, so we can't make more changes to it at that night, so we need to have it ready to go prior to that.
We'll be back to you with our thoughts.
Yeah, I'm gonna send this for legal review too.
Okay.
So we need a motion to continue this to the next.
I would just, so I think so on that last sentence, multiple minimum height towers for next generation technology. I think that covers, without having us have to stipulate that, we're not gonna be the experts on that. We're relying on the applicant to bring the next generation technology. I think that does what I was trying to
Preferred.
prefer,
We prefer to minimal height or,
next generation
Yeah.
technology. I think that satisfies with what I was trying to poorly communicate.
Okay, unless I hear any opposition, I'll pop that in too.
okay.
Okay.
All right, so we're moving on to the next.
Yeah.
That's moving to the next.
Yeah,
meeting.
we'll come up on February 1st. If you want to continue it, you can, but I don't think we're gonna use it. It's not like an application. All right, proposed amendment F are key changes to 10.01, the Wetlands Conservation District. I did work with Sandy Crystal on this. Unfortunately, she's not able to be here tonight, but we did work together on this, so. Let's see. So I'll just go through each of them. We removed a line that said that the only exception to undisturbed wetland buffers was for driveway crossings that are in compliance with town, state, and federal permitting. I'm not really sure what that meant, so. It doesn't seem like it's really being applied. It just doesn't make sense. We removed the word or vernal pool from these. We're saying that buffers aren't required if the wetland or surface water is a constructed swale, roadside ditch, detention basin, etc. Because there's no such thing as a vernal pool. That's one of those type of constructed items. And then we added that an excavated agricultural irrigation or fire pond currently in use as such. Sandy said there might have been a case in the past where someone said something was an agricultural pond 100 years ago or something. It's not anymore. Now it's a functioning pond. So we added currently in use as such. The table of uses for the Wetland Conservation District. We made several changes here. There are a few items like erection and construction of structures, which previously said not permitted in all of the areas. So we added it by conditional use permit and wetlands and the buffers. And I believe that's actually what's been done in practice because that's typically what a wetland conditional use permit is for. There's a structure in the buffer. So it was odd that that said not permitted, and I don't know how that happened.
Like it- Yeah, that is weird.
Right? That's like the main purpose for a wetland CUP.
Right.
Well, no, a structure, so like a shed or a
Oh.
corner of your garage or a ground mounted solar panel. She added water access structure, which is usually like a dock or steps or something, as a conditional use permit in all of the areas. We took out pollution of wetland surface or groundwaters because that's just not something that's not allowed at all. So just didn't even need to be in here. And then the draining, dredging, filling, or changing the flow of water kind of got deleted that because it got added into other sections. We added the dredging in with the recontouring and grading, and added it as a conditional use permit in the buffers. The logging operation, she added the language that says it's logging operations that are not associated with site plan or subdivision approvals. Activities altering the drainage system with a CUP in the wetland buffer. The activities incidental to ordinary residential use. We said no soil disturbance instead of regrading or contouring, and that it may be subject to additional restrictions. And made it so those are not permitted in the prime wetland and the prime wetland buffer. That's typically, right now, it says it's permitted, so you could have a prime wetland in your backyard that you mow regularly because that's normal vegetation maintenance. That's really not what's best for your prime wetland in your backyard to be mowed like a lawn. So that's why we changed that to not permitted. Sandy cleaned up a little bit of the language in the footnotes, just adding the references, the correct language. And that was it for those.
The real policy change is that permitted. For prime wetland buffer.
So, yeah, that part of mowing, I can see not the prime wetland. But I mean, as you get into some of that buffer, that's saying not in the prime wetland buffer.
Yeah, because elsewhere, it's confusing to me because elsewhere, earlier on, it says that wetland buffers shall consist of ungraded and undisturbed upland. And then here we say that you can, do normal vegetation maintenance, mowing, trimming. So I found that kind of counterintuitive. If it's supposed to be undisturbed, yet you can mow it.
I don't know, what if someone's been doing that for years and all of a sudden we say you're not allowed to do that? What if you've been growing in a wetland buffer? I don't know if the buffers, it's
They
dependent.
probably don't know that they're doing it.
That's what I mean. I mean, yeah. They will not stop, but we're now making it against the rules to mow something that might be 30 feet from a wetland because it's in a buffer. They don't know it. I'm not sure I agree with that.
Yeah, I don't either. Which the prime wetland buffer is a 75-foot,
I think it's
150.
150.
150.
So that is a very big area.
I don't agree.
Yeah,
So leave the prime wetland buffer as permitted and not permitted in the prime wetland itself. Is
If
that
you
what
can
you're saying?
mow, if you can mow a wetland, kudos to you.
There are wetlands because they think it's their lawn.
Well, if it's the actual wetland, I mean, it's,
That's, I mean, how, if it's a true wetland,
You'd be surprised, some wetlands don't look like wetlands.
Well, and even more so in buffers. But
I think I'd be okay with saying that in the wetland, it's not okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so we would say not permitted in the prime wetland. And what about regular wetlands?
Only the difference.
There, so we have certain large, very productive wetland areas that are prime wetlands. Wetlands are everything else, the regular ones that might be smaller.
Permitted today.
Yes.
There's no change to wetland.
Right.
Which wouldn't change it.
Okay. And then the prime wetland buffer, we will leave that as permitted. Okay. So we're just changing prime wetland, not permitted, the other three will be permitted. Got it. Yep, that's fine.
I can still open the public.
Sure.
Yeah, so I'll open that to the public on our to amend the wetlands conservation, anybody? I guess we're all here for Bow Mill. All right. I will close the public hearing on that, and you're gonna finish talking about that.
yeah, I'm still, I don't understand why we would restrict, I mean, I get the restriction in the prime wetland. Why wouldn't we restrict it in the wetland as well then? I agree that it should be in the buffers, but if we're restricting it in the prime wetland, why would we not restrict it in the wetland?
Well, it isn't just mowing the lawn. I mean, it's removing vegetation.
Right.
You wanna hack down the weeds along, that are growing up out of something, when it's just a wetland. I mean, there's more than, a finished lawn there, that's, so. I'm not 100%, on where it becomes a wetland to a prime wetland, but, some places that are, generally wet, but on prime
Yeah,
wetland, I mean. When it's.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't designation of a prime wetland isn't, it's a town, and the town designates which wetlands are prime. It's not like a state requirement or some other requirement. It's like we say which ones. are
Yes,
prime wetlands.
at town meeting, some back in the day, they were designated. They have to meet
Even
certain,
with that, along with mowing, removing dead or diseased vegetation. I would. Want to be able to clean up the area. In my yard. I'm glad they don't have any wetlands in my yard. I don't have to worry about that, but I imagine most people would want to.
I get all that, I just don't, I'm trying to understand the difference between why we're restricting it on prime wetland versus not restricting it on the wetland.
Well, I think Sandy looked at the rule, right? Thought it.
generally prime wetlands have a certain higher level of protection because they are more productive wetlands. They have higher level habitat. They're just generally more valuable wetlands. So their protections are stronger, and that's why there's a bigger buffer for them.
Does anybody know of a place in town that we know that is a prime wetland versus a regular wetland, so we have.
Oh. That's prime wetland.
gotta be, it's huge.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, so there is a lot of habitat, a lot of,
Those are a road that runs through it.
Details.
This is our brand new
New
website.
website.
Look at brand new website. And
Yeah,
look,
so
there's a button
When
right
did
here.
that come out?
Today.
Today.
Oh. It was just.
There's a photo too. It is from Bo. It is.
It is.
Oh,
We
it's-
really
it's true.
I'm just joking, I'm just joking.
Um. These areas with blue lines are the prime, designated prime wetlands throughout town, for the area around Drury Pond.
Can you now stay on that?
Mhm.
Or back out for a second,
Yeah,
and then
turn
turn on the wetlands now.
Yeah, the regular wetlands layer is. It's from the National Wetlands Inventory, so it's not. Accurate to like. But you can at least get an idea that there's a lot more regular wetlands, and then the few larger pockets are designated as prime wetlands. And there's a lot more on there that aren't part of the National Wetlands Inventory,
a lot of other wetlands that are.
just not on the map because they're smaller, weren't picked up on this national scale inventory of them. You have to go put boots on the ground and actually identify them.
Can you turn that back off? So there's not really a significant, like the bulk of the biggest portion of the wetlands is already deemed prime by our definition.
But there are definitely a lot of small wetlands, more than what.
Yeah, I get that. I was just curious. I was expecting there to be more wetlands.
There are really, I think that
Than what
map
that map
layer is
showed.
not,
Okay, all right.
But our prime wetlands are the bigger tracts, the bigger areas, so. Which is understandable that they're more important
That's why they're
and
prime,
more.
so are we? Good. Right, now, moment everyone's been waiting for. So we're gonna wait until the first, we'll get back. Proposed amendment G is the Bow Mills Mixed Use District, which is Article 17. I have been working with a few different consultants on this. I've been working with Stu Arnett. He helps with a lot of economic development projects. And we brainstormed and have gone through, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 different drafts of this. And then I also ran it by Matt Monahan and the Central New Hampshire Regional Planning Commission, and they provided some more input. So that's where we are so far. The main, okay. The main reason for these changes are when we looked at the original language, it felt that it was very focused on those large tracts to be developed as a kind of a large scale development, and it didn't have a lot that seemed to apply to the smaller existing lots in the district, and it was kind of difficult to apply it to those when we had this minimum tract size of 10 acres. The other thing that came up is we, in seeing the proposal for the brewery in the district, we talked about the need to add small scale manufacturing as allowable use in the district, because we felt that was really compatible with the intent and the purpose of that district. I will say I have a fresh hot off the press version, which is separate from your big packet. It says 1/11/24 draft on the bottom of it. J4.
A question. The one reference that was in there, because I had read it before, and it looks like it's still. Maybe it's not in there now. It's not. So you took out the, whatever that, superscript was, reference.
Yeah, so how we got there. Stu and I went through all these different ideas. At one point, we had a really complex system that had all these different tracks. We're like, okay, so it was like a flow chart almost that we drew out. Like, so we have a separate path for smaller lots versus bigger lots. And then we had basically this as like an option almost, as like if you're going to do something innovative, you could use these requirements that would allow you greater flexibility in your development. And we used that commercial district as kind of almost the default. So like more of a traditional development using what's allowable under the commercial district. But if you can do something innovative that goes beyond that, you can have more flexibility. It got very complex very quickly. And I tried to bring it back down into a simpler form. That C2 was because the 2 means that you have either sewer or water. I think that was the version of commercial we were looking at, which only applies to the dimensional requirements. And then I realized that we're not even referencing that we're only talking about the uses that are allowable in the commercial district, which are the same among the different versions of commercial. So I took out superscript.
Okay. Yeah, that was my main question, was what it was in reference to.
And then I found, well, I had wondered, but then when I talked to Matt Monahan, it felt like an overlay district. Like, we're giving you the option to do what's allowable under commercial or do this innovative path, which is an overlay district, but there is no underlying zoning. This is the zoning district. So we were kind of straddling the line between overlay versus regular zoning. And so I actually, in the newest version that came out today, I literally wrote, this is not an overlay district. However, some components of the commercial district are incorporated. So basically you're allowed to do any of the uses that are allowed in the commercial district.
Carrie, is that the only change that you made, or are there other changes?
Now there's
Okay.
the planning board would have the ability to waive provisions of this except the permitted uses in the dimensional requirements. So you have generally pretty strong abilities to waive anything in the general provisions. Under the purpose, under section B, we listed some objectives, and you would be asked to demonstrate that you meet at least a few of those objectives, which
It says at least 2.
yeah, so we can talk about if at least 2 make sense.
I think that's fair.
I don't understand what bullet 4 means in that,
The top one.
yeah, 2B.
Well, maybe that doesn't belong there. I think what it's trying to say is that one of the purposes of this district is to allow innovation, basically, and meet the balance without just saying you can do whatever you want. Be innovative within the guardrails. Let's
Say that.
Just see if Stu is still available.
I guess we should move this one to Sarah. That's what all the people are here for.
I know. Take a stab at adding a definition for small scale manufacturing, like we had talked about it being reused back. I threw in the 10,000 square feet and must include retail, but that seemed to be what I remembered as a consensus coming out of the last meeting. I just wanted to make sure that that was still what you were all thinking. And so the permitted uses, we're allowing anything that's in the regular commercial, and then in addition, residential, including multi-family, multi-unit development, mix of residential and commercial, the small scale manufacturing based on that definition, innovative transportation facilities. And the one as I was editing this today, where it says other innovative uses, I'm not sure if in a practical sense of trying to administer this ordinance, if that makes sense to say other, because I guess you'd have to decide if somebody's other fits or not, because we haven't said that the permitted uses can be waived. So that's something that would have to be a variance. So somebody would have to decide if the other is other. So I'm almost thinking we have to get rid of that.
Well, I mean, someone has to decide if the transportation facility is innovative.
Same with small
Right.
scale manufacturing.
So, I mean, yeah, other innovative uses, e.g. might help, but I mean, we're not gonna get around deciding what fits the definition in any way.
Yeah, because I mean, like in an example of the small scale manufacturing, while we have the definition, it still is open-ended because it says typical uses, but not limited to. So there's still gonna be stuff that's coming in that may be outside of.
Hi, Stu.
Hey there.
Thanks for your patience.
Well, I made it to 8 o'clock and then I figured I'd take a quick break. So I'm back.
Thanks for joining.
Welcome back, Stu.
It's interesting. I've been in that room for years in the rows where everyone's sitting and like a human being. Now I'm like this 10-foot tall giant in the corner above everybody. So looking down at everybody. So it's a very different perspective. Glad to be here. Congratulations. Glad you're taking this up.
All right, so does anyone have specific questions for Stu or?
I have a question about the building design standard. It says 1510.
Sorry, where are we?
Oh gosh, in the back, under,
Yeah, got it.
Well, 1510, I don't,
Yeah, that's from the business development district. It's a separate district that's published separately. And we didn't make any changes. This is what the current ordinance says.
what are those design standards?
Those,
if I could jump in, I think the idea was to change the land use allowability, but not change this accepted building standards. So Carrie, if I'm right, these are the ones are elsewhere in the zoning code also. The building standards are not a change.
Yeah, that makes sense. I foresee is going to be a problem with development in this area is blending a new type of use with the existing uses. And so I appreciate what you're saying, that we're not intending to amend this, but I do think it's worth us taking a look at it and saying, do we think we should recommend an amendment to this or put a different type of restriction within this and not reference this building standard?
Yeah, I'm just pulling it up now, so.
I know some of the,
And a quick answer would be that the building standards is a part of your other sections. So I think that's why we want to make sure we didn't exclude it. And if it's no longer a relevant, as building standards change, and you obviously want to look at it over time. But we did not want to exclude it because that meant someone could come in and not have to meet it.
I think maybe I can give an example, and perhaps this isn't applied, but if somebody builds whatever the maximum allowable glass structure there, there's going to be backlash. Right.
Glass is allowed. So, 15.10 is the exterior building facade performance standards. So no exterior building surface visible from the public right of way shall be constructed of any material except brick, stone, stucco, concrete,
So no tents.
block, glass, clapboard, vinyl, metal combination. And then there's a limit on the maximum percentage of metal visible from the street. And then subtle neutral colors, paint colors should relate to natural materials. Direction should relate to the prominent direction expression of nearby buildings. The roof form.
We didn't rate that.
And
I can,
varied offset roof sites, window placements, basically not just like a blank box.
And that's the existing statute. This
Yeah.
this is not a proposed change.
And that rooftop mechanical equipment should be screened.
so the business development standard that this is was put in when in our I2 zone, half of that got changed to business development and new standards got put in, basically trying to keep things prettier and not having tin cans. When that was put in, instead of being the line between I2 and BD going with 3A, it went basically about where Dunkley Road is. One side was, one side wasn't. Which we've gotten rid of the business development district altogether, but we've kept the standards, which is a lot of multiple roof lines, so buildings have some style to them, not just a square box.
And even though the business development district is gone, we refer to those standards in the site plan regulations already. So any site plan you do anywhere in town, you have to meet 1510, the building facade standards, or request a waiver from it.
But those are the standards we're using
Everywhere.
everywhere.
Okay.
And it's the same for the landscaping and the lighting.
I think the purpose of this amendment is to look at the land uses and not the building specs. And if that needs to be looked at, then we should look at it, but they are not changed in this amendment.
While we're on this page, under E, the residential uses, we said no more than 75% of the total combined proposed floor space for residential and commercial mixed use may be designated for residential. So you have by square feet. Yes, you can't have a straight residential. At least some.
And Carrie, I'm gonna
It takes,
just, I'm sorry to keep jumping. This is a change from the earlier one, not in the percentages, but in the floor issue. Going back, the major reason this needs to be looked at is it was written for the exit one large acreage. And it really made it awkward for some of the very important smaller sites in the same district. Because you had 1/2 acre, 1 acre sites that you were talking about bus stops and things. So the other one says, I think it's also 2575, but it talks about floors, what could be on the first floor versus the second floor. And in reality, if you look at almost anything that isn't in a very urban area, you do not see retail first floor and apartments residential second floor, because it's a real building code nightmare, both for things like fire protection and also just noise and nuisance. I mean, think about living on above a restaurant or something. It's just, unless it's a very urban area. So we wanted to keep that requirement that you want to mix. You don't want someone to come in and say, I'm going to just do all residential, but you're not telling them it's by floor, but it's by percentage of total. Especially makes sense on smaller lots where you're not going to have a 3-floor building on a acre lot.
the dimensional requirements, you'll see that they are split so that there are different requirements for the smaller lots that are under 5 acres and versus the larger lots that are greater than 5 acres.
Again, that is the obvious answer. There is a bigger lot, you can be farther away, or you should be farther away. It also takes into some consideration of septic systems and such on larger lots. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't hear it.
I think Carrie said that the dimensional requirements were non-waivable.
Oh, sorry.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yeah, I guess that's something that could be considered. Typically, things like dimensional requirements, the lot size, the frontage, those are things that would typically require a variance. But I don't, Stu,
You
it's
wonder
correct
about
that
Yeah.
we could allow the planning board to waive those items.
Yeah, and obviously, if someone, not obviously, typically, if someone pushes back against that, is they're going to want the requirement to be less. They're not going to say, "Can you make my requirement more?" So when you look at a 5 acre site, or you look at a 1 acre site, or a 1/2 acre site, or a 1.5 acre site, does that seem like a reasonable set aside from side, back, or front, or not? What we're trying to do is keep a large site, a 15, 20, 30 acre site, from bumping right up against people's their next door neighbors by having the small lot requirement. And then also on the flip side, not making someone has a 3/4 acre have these very large set size. So I think it's entirely up to you what you think those minimums are. If you think they're reasonable. In fact, Carrie, if I think I remember it, we actually dropped one of them from like 50 feet to 25 or 75 to 50, just to, especially in the under 5 acre.
The current setbacks in this district are only 10 feet. So you have to have a 50-foot setback from the residential zone boundary if you butt up against that, but everywhere else is only 10 feet, which is significantly less than anywhere else in town. So we kept that 10 feet for sites greater than 5 acres, but we increased it to 30, 50, and 20 for the smaller lots.
Why? It seems kind of backwards, doesn't it? I mean, your smaller lot,
It has less
you're
room.
you're getting really small. You know, the lot that they're looking to do the brewery on, was in the conceptual, it was tough to get some parking spaces, and now
Yeah, I think I agree with it. It's like
it almost seems like it should be reversed. Where the big lot, you have room to have some space.
Yes, Stu, are you able to speak to the rationale for that?
I think I heard most of the question, but the answer
talking
would
about
be the
stuff-
set asides for the larger lots. I think you do have a larger set aside, other than one of them was reduced at the last meeting.
No, so
Um,
the
But
larger
like the
lots-
road frontage is smaller for a small lot. I'm sorry, can I cut you off? Excuse me.
So the minimum setbacks, currently it's 10 feet everywhere. And then in the greater than 5 acres, it is 10 feet. But in the smaller lots, we have it as 30, 50, and 20.
By the way, that might be a good thing to change.
That's what
I
I'm
think that
thinking.
it might have come from it. The language originally might have come from it being a, the planned community thing where the lots would be internal lots with kind of cul-de-sacs and, a planned community where there would be apartments or condominiums or something on these internal streets, and they'd want them to be close. But I think it probably makes sense to push that back a little bit.
So we would keep the 10 feet everywhere as it is currently.
Except for any of these going against a residential lot is 50 feet.
Right.
regardless.
Right, and that's the residential zone.
To
Yeah,
residential zone.
not just a lot in.
Yeah,
the-
yeah,
if you
it's a
look at the
residential.
house. Yeah.
So.
And the idea here and the threading the needle here is giving this board the opportunity to say, here's what we expect for outcomes. That's why you see a little bit more language in the front than you usually would about what we hope to see as outcomes. If you notice the first couple paragraphs are, under B, there's a whole series of bulleted points saying, here's what we think the community wants to have as a result of development. And there's no criteria in there. There's no formulas or anything. So if you have a better idea, talk to us. If you just want to go by the regular, if you want to just know what you can do without having any uncertainty, then you can just go with a commercial zoning and you know what you have. It does put a little bit more onus on this board to make subjective decisions on what they see as what's right for the community. But we're clearly seeing, development patterns that are different, where they're mixing things together. And this is a tool to give you a chance to say what's good for the community versus this is what you have to do, take it or leave it. And if you don't like it, by the way, the first vote you have is before they even go down you have to decide if they're eligible to go down this path based on what they present to you. So it's not something they have the right to do. It's something you decide, gee, it's worth considering their better idea.
Stu, I did tone that part of it down after talking to the Regional Planning Commission. Because it's not an overlay district. Like there isn't
yeah, I see that. Yeah, I'm looking at yeah. But they
so
still get the vote. Right.
I did tone that down because it's not an overlay. There isn't really the default zoning to fall back on if we say, hey, you guys say, hey, it's not innovative. We're saying it needs to meet these objectives that relate to the master.
But under 2C, there is a point where the planning board has to decide if they want to consider it that way.
Right.
I would really like that. We see projects all the time. We really have no authority to say, I don't think that really fits, right? Or sometimes we try to find, the public's against it, and it's like, all right, well, what grounds do we even have? Like, this is, which is where all the fights come from. It's like, well, it's permitted by use, so. You know, so here at least we're able to say like, it doesn't work.
You're right.
There are a few requirements that were in the original ordinance, such as, the shared, pedestrian trail and emergency vehicle access, parallel frontage, transit facilities, things like that. The open space requirements for residential, the public neighborhood meetings, noise and light impact, all those things we pushed up to be just for the ones over 5 acres. We're doing a small project on an existing lot. Those requirements feel too big. Those are really for the larger scale projects. So we push those off to just apply to the large ones. I think one question that may arise is the 5 acres. Do we need to talk about tracks versus lots? Again, like the old ordinance referred to tracts of 10 acres or more, which means it could be made up of multiple lots that are being developed together under one proposal. So if somebody ended up buying up several lots adjacent to each other and came to us with a development proposal across all of them, they're all individually under 5 lots, but they're developing it together with a cohesive plan that met all of the goals of the master plan. I think you'd want to consider that as the larger scale, probably, versus the under 5
Yeah,
acres.
I agree with that. If it's gonna be, if they're putting multiple lots together and they get over this 5 acres, then yeah.
It feels to me like the dimension should be waivable. That's an example of one reason why. Right, where we could, if we don't have the ability to waive it, we gotta be a lot more precise with the language
I
to
know.
cover, right? But if we can waive it,
Sue and I even talked about, do we just set a ceiling where you can waive it up to a ceiling? And then we're like, in effect, that really is just the limit, right?
I can just see like a parking lot come in that's 9 feet and we're like, and it's next to another parking lot, and we're like, why? We should just do that.
There is an option here that we looked at, which is here's what's allowed, or come in a planning board and tell them everything that you think should happen as a better idea. And we wanted to get away from that because at least our counsel is that puts too much pressure on a planning board when someone comes in and says, so, because you don't know if what they say is going to work, it's going to work. And so you want to have some minimum standards. 10 feet's pretty small. It was 30, I think it came down. So what we're trying to do here is thread the needle about giving you some standards that don't move, but also giving a lot of flexibility on the upside. But if you want to go 10 to 0 or 10 to 20, it's one stroke of a word processor.
10 feet is not much. This room's 20 feet wide, right?
But there are other dimensional requirements that I could see could be potentially waived.
So you want to include that in waivable stuff, Carrie, is what you're saying?
It sounds like that was coming from the board. Just to give more flexibility.
So back to the setbacks for a second. So are we saying that we're gonna change it to 10 on both? Cause I proposed that for the greater than 5, that be more than 10.
I'm still struggling with the tract versus lot situation, because if you think about in reality, like think about the Flatley proposal where they were going to divide it up into small lots. They start with a large tract and then divide it up.
It still should have been considered one track.
What type of setbacks would we want applied to those smaller lot, resulting lots? And I don't know the answer, but.
Yeah, and I think, Carrie, we had a higher number in earlier and it got reduced.
Yeah, just because, well, because existing it is 10 feet.
Right. And we had 30 for the over 5 acres. I think I got pulled back by the planning board to 10.
Yeah.
And you're in a position now of trying to figure out in January of 2024 what you might see in the next 10 years, and it's impossible to tell. So that's that needle. We're trying to, give you enough standards so someone doesn't come in and say, well, your regs don't tell us to do anything specifically versus your regs are so specific we can't get anything done.
I think on like the topic of the setbacks, I would prefer to see a larger setback and them ask for the ability to waive it rather than to set it at 10. Especially on the ones that are greater than 5 acres. That flatly is a special circumstance, and I understand that, but I'm thinking on those larger ones, like we would want that to be a greater setback, and then have the ability to ask for a waiver for that specifically.
Yeah, so would you propose taking that 30, 50, 20? That was just switching basically.
I would, but I'm open to hear what everyone else.
Well, I would say it's probably only waivable, otherwise you have to deal with the tract issue.
Yeah.
Right.
So you can either ignore the tract issue by making it waivable, thereby if Flatley came in, you would say, okay, well, we can waive this based on this plan.
Right.
But if they didn't, it's in there.
So
Makes sense.
So that would be that, the only thing in this that couldn't be waived is the permitted uses. And if somebody wanted a use that was not allowed, they would have to go to the ZBA for a variance. It still leaves that other innovative uses category though, so that's almost a waiver if you ask me.
So Carrie, with that on your updated version, it's referencing permitted uses, but
The wrong number.
okay.
I got
That's
it
fine.
already, thank you.
Yeah.
I got it.
Okay.
Well, you said that for that permit, so you're right about number 5. That's what I was thinking too. Like that's sort of a waiver light.
Yeah, so under permitted uses, number 5 says other innovative uses.
But if we were to
That is
say,
a window for somebody.
yeah, but if we were to say denied, then their recourse is zoning board. Which really doesn't seem like a bad procedural outcome for somebody. It gives us flexibility to not know what's going in here. And gives them recourse to say, all right, sure, but the zoning board has a higher standard to take.
And that's a significant widening of permitted uses with hopefully without it being leaving the barn door open. It talks about some of the trends that we all see. And I think they reflect what the goals of the community are as far as making this a vibrant center.
Going back to that small scale manufacturing definition, do you all feel comfortable with the 10,000 square feet and the retail component?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like that.
Well, we're gonna vote on all of it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we don't.
No, I'm just getting feedback to see if you
I
like
mean,
the
this is
definition
obviously
of
gonna
data.
go to the next meeting.
Yeah, this is definitely going to the February 1st hearing,
Yeah.
without doubt.
I thought that was well crafted, the language that's in there, based off of what the prior examples were that we were looking at.
That's a borrow from a few and stick them together.
Oh, like examples of how.
No, I
Projects
put
other
together a few
towns.
different definitions from around the country of small scale artisan manufacturing. Tried to pull some pieces from a few and string them together.
If I might also carry this language is exactly the opposite of 10 years ago standard, where all the zoning code said, we don't want anything inside of a manufacturing facility that has anything to do with people walking in off the street. So it specifically said, don't have retail, don't have, and what really changed that is the brewery thing, where brewers started saying, but we want people to come into the street, or foodies, and so that's why it's really encouraging. That we worked years ago with some of the, like 603 when it first came to New Hampshire, had to get a variance to sell, and they had to do like pretzels or something so that they could say they were selling food. So this is recognizes that a lot of people are going to manufacturing places, be it food, be it furniture, be it art, watching things being made, participating, and also involving themselves in retail. And that's what you want. That's a great community asset.
Vibrancy.
Okay, wanna hear from the public and see what. All right. So if anybody has anything questions, comments, concerns with our mixed use district? Yes, please state your name and,
Dan Thomas,
Your address.
oh, and your address too.
I appreciate the conversation in regards to the setbacks. One thing that I wanted to mention, the project that I'm working on with the brewery, with the wetlands in the back, and the small footprint of the lot, implementing setbacks greater than 10 feet would effectively stop my project. So, I would like to see the 10-foot setbacks for the small units. For the small units.
Else have any?
Question, Marlene Shea.
Can you say your last name?
FHA. We have 6 acres of land. We're just tipping iceberg now, process developing the land behind us, possibly residential, something, because as you know, churches are having a fairly hard time. So we're trying to bring in some additional funding for the church, because we want to stay in Bow Mills. As you see, we just had a church re-roofed, which was a major expense to our low budget that we have. When you have a setback of 200 feet, is that of the new building that would be going would be going behind the church, would give all the space behind our church? Is that 200 feet setback from the existing building that's there, meaning the church, or does that mean the new building that's going to be built behind the church?
I don't think
The 200
200 feet is the front.
Frontage.
is how much that's land along the road.
Yeah.
The setbacks that we've been talking about, is the distance from your lot line. So basically you can't build a building right up against the edge of your lot, against your neighbor's
Right.
lot. So that's how far you have to be in. The 200 feet is the frontage, so the amount of, width along the road you have.
Okay. So,
Can you just,
Sandy Eldridge, ELDREDGE, Bow Mills Methodist Church. So if the frontage right now is not 200 feet, we have 6 acres. I'm not sure whether it is a reason.
Be surprised if you're not. Yeah,
I think you.
Okay.
that's
So
pretty
we
small.
could use that as our frontage if we build behind our church.
If you were to subdivide it, you would need frontage for both lots, but if you,
When you say subdivide.
so actually
Make it
divide
two
it into 2 separate lots.
Ownership.
If you were to
Ownership.
sell
No,
off,
we continue. Oh, no, no.
If you're gonna keep it,
Continue with ownership.
then you would probably be fine with your frontage. Let me just find your lot on
It's
here.
very hard to find, because it's right in the corner of that map.
Right up here, right?
Yes, you got it.
The.
42?
43.
Is it this one?
Yeah. 42.
That's a jump. Oh, no, sorry. All right, let's see what we have. Oh, you have 199.
We can round up. We can round up.
Well,
Does the back, anything else hit that in the?
At 93, which I don't know how does that-
Just a little bit more?
we go right to 93.
Yeah.
So I don't know about
Yeah,
setbacks
basically,
for 93.
For wondering.
Full frontage on 93.
Yeah. But do we have to have a certain setback because it's 93? Is there something additional?
The only thing I would say there is, people living there, you'd want to keep as much tree line or,
Good.
you know, noise.
Okay, can you zoom back in now that, like, how many of those lots don't have,
This proposal is if it's over 5 acres, you have to have 200 feet. If it's under 5 acres, you don't have to.
yeah, so I'm just curious, like, of the other ones that are in that would be over the 5 acres,
There's
are
only
there?
a couple of them that are over 5 acres, to be honest.
That's why I was hoping it'd be quick
Yeah,
to
it's a big
see,
one.
to see,
97.
I think all the other ones. would have-
have,
The only one that wouldn't. Probably yours, because it doesn't have any, right? Not to call you out, but.
39's under 5 acres?
yeah, 3.5.
Oh, yeah.
So. The one,
Was the library.
I believe. Alright, the mouse. There we go.
But I mean, you can waive frontage.
Yeah, so.
Like
the-
43A is, what's that?
It's currently not waived.
Okay.
So what's the frontage requirement for? Full Mills District?
Currently,
200,
200.
And this,
Well, this
So
is, I don't know.
43A would be the end of the lot, because it's just at the end of the road, so it's not really much frontage. 43A. Which is Bovee.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think it's,
Well, there's no, is there a?
There's Northeast Ave, they get 50 feet
50
on it.
feet of frontage.
right, so that one would be interesting, but that was gonna be an issue. regardless.
Yeah,
But it's not, if it's not waivable,
Can you go back over to the church's lot 42? So,
Actually, 300 feet.
On a, yeah, it's just public versus private.
Yeah,
can you,
300 feet for a public street.
can you zoom in a little bit for that? So. Yeah, it's gonna make it even harder, right? Cause. So if you're looking to put something in that back portion, you already have a right of way easement that's there. And you'd probably have to put some sort of access. Like, where would you put your access point to get to the back of that lot? It's gonna be even more probably reduced, right?
again, we're just,
I'm just trying to walk through to answer your question, like,
Carrie, I think if they were to subdivide the lot behind them and they had a shared entrance, you'd still be. Both lots would still have to meet just the one 200 feet.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be really getting into the details, and I think what they're saying is that they wouldn't actually want to subdivide, they would retain ownership.
But if they did, they would not have to go to 400
Okay,
because it's an approved lot that has frontage of 200 feet.
Hmm.
I mean, we could check that, but I think or else every time you did a lot behind another one, you'd have to be doubling the road frontage.
this is like an interesting use case.
thank you.
yeah.
It's like, I'm gonna put words in your mouth for a second, so feel free to say, no, that's not what we're talking about. If they were to put an apartment building, how would that stack up against the start of this?
The,
Like
purpose statement?
the objectives, yeah.
That's a good question. So.
So it's not subdivided now, right? Because if it's subdivided, that's like a kind of a different question. But it's not subdivided, it's one lot, they have a church and an apartment building. Pretend the lot is empty, and that's what they come in and propose. It's like,
I mean, one of my other questions is with the church, what happens with their property tax?
Yeah, I don't know what would happen if they had a income generating.
Because like the church itself, right, is that taxable, is that? That's tax exempt, right? So if the church puts in apartments,
But none of that would affect your land use requirements.
well, it kind of does though. Point one is, does this expand the town's property tax base? So look, let's assume the answer to that is no, then they would fail point one, right? Combining
you-
elements of-
Yes, you would, then you would go through the checklist and see how they do. But I'm just saying that their taxability does not affect their land use
Yeah, that
eligibility.
makes sense. Yep,
So
I mean,
combining.
they
the
might have
elements of
some things you like and some things you don't.
right.
It would check two.
And that's why, what is it, 2C is that you're allowed to look at the thing in its entirety and decide if it goes forward.
Yeah,
You know, might be that 3 things don't work, but boy, there's a 4th one that really is a home run.
right.
I
Let's
think
let
it
them
would
do it.
check It would check at least 2, and that's how it's written. So if you just ran through it and you graded that with like a tight, they would still satisfy 2 of the.
Yeah, I think Carrie, we specifically
Desired
did say you had to have 50% or 70% of those bullets, because just for that very reason, if someone came in with something that was really spectacular in one of them, but not necessarily all the other ones, you'd still want to obviously encourage it.
Yeah, so right now it just says at least 2 of the objectives, so I think that's something for the.
I'm
board
sorry,
to
you did that,
consider.
right. At
Is
least
it-
2.
If at least 2 is the right number.
I still like.
No more than 75%, so it'd be the church plus the apartment building. Yeah, okay. Interesting.
So that's 2 out of 8.
interesting piece of this, isn't it?
No, it's great. This is.
Yeah.
good discussion. So I guess, how do we get this to being ready to go for February 1st? Yes.
Oh, yeah, did anybody else in the public have anything?
Just a question. What is the definition of?
That's funny. We actually talked about that when I talked to the Regional Planning Commission, when we talked about adding that definition section, we put in small scale manufacturing, and he's like, suggested that I put a definition of innovative in there as well, and I was like, I didn't know what to write.
By the way, be careful, Carrie. Matt's listening.
That's a different Matt.
Oh, sorry.
We're
You're gonna say something
all
bad about him.
all clear, it's a different Matt. No, yeah, I struggled to define innovative and then felt that kind of like what you said, the concept behind it is that it leaving the door open for good proposals. Yeah, and giving a lot of power to the planning board to judge that and have flexibility in reviewing them.
It doesn't have amended. City of copies of paper. Do you have copies there that for general public, or are they gonna be put on the website?
It will be, I can gonna lend you mine, but I've written on it. I can print you one later, or if someone else has one they haven't written on. And then it will go on the website, but if anyone else wants one, you can, I'll get your email and I can send it to you tomorrow too. So,
Anybody else have? I'm going to close the public hearing. Bring it back to the table.
okay, so we need a game plan so I can make sure this is tidied up so that we can post it for, so what I have marked up so far is, under purpose A, permitted uses, I'm changing that 3 to 4 because I renumbered, and removing dimensional requirements so that the planning board can waive everything except the permitted uses. I still have- In the dimensional requirements, I'm swapping the minimum setbacks so that for the smaller lots, it's gonna be 10 feet. For the larger lots, it's 30, 50, 20, but knowing that all of the dimensional requirements can now be waived by the planning board. And that's actually all I have noted. Okay. Perfect. So the other item that is on your agenda is a discussion on impact fees, and Selectman Poulin is, I believe, on the line.
Matt. Hey, Matt. So this Stuart will get off.
Thank you, Stuart.
Nice to see
Appreciate
everybody
you.
again.
Thank
well.
you very much,
Thank
Stu.
you.
Right. Are you there?
You're on
You-
mute. You're on
You,
mute.
you muted. Did you fall asleep, Matt?
I just have to quick. So Selectman Poulin reached out about the idea of reconsidering impact fees. I know he had a conversation with you. I told him we'd stick it on the agenda to get an initial gauge of the level of interest.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming
Thank
out,
you.
everyone. I appreciate hearing your comments. I think specifically school impact fees were put into place previously. They were suspended in 2016.
That's when we paid off the high school.
That makes sense.
Which is why because you can't collect a fee when you don't have, it was paid for, so we
Right.
really had to stop collecting the fee.
Right, so he has wondered about re-implementing a school impact fee. The impact fees are paid when somebody builds a new residence. Currently, the only impact fees we charge are for the public safety building, which goes to pay the bond for the new public safety center. I believe it's $1,037 for a new single family home and $723 for an accessory dwelling unit or apartment. If we have any apartment. Oh, coming back in. So the process would be look for some feedback from the board tonight if you think it's a good idea to pursue. We would work with a consultant.
What's the rationale for re-implementing it?
That's what I want Selectman Poulin to talk about.
Developments coming in. Strong, we got one off Roberts.
Well, a $13 million bond for
Yeah.
addition to the
It's
elementary.
because it's
Yeah.
the rationale that we have the elementary school.
Right.
Addition.
Right.
Yes.
You have to have that bond to have an impact fee.
No,
Yeah, well,
you have to have a purpose. Selectman Poulin, are you there? Matt? Are you there, Matt? Oh,
it's working.
it's almost here. I want to let him introduce it.
I'm hoping I'm there. Oh, there you go.
Woo!
There you go.
Thanks, Matt.
Welcome to the meeting.
Hoping you could give us a little introduction of
Sorry,
why now.
I was trying to do that from my phone and it wasn't working.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. Can you guys hear me? Can you nod your head, Carrie?
Yeah, we
We
can
can
hear
hear
you.
you.
If you turn off your video, it might work better because you're a little frozen.
Okay.
If you just turn off video and do sound, it might be better off.
There we
You
go.
still there?
No,
Yeah, that's
no,
good.
so I know yeah, you can hear me. So I know we discontinued the impact fee, like you said, back in 2016. And with this recent, expansion on the elementary school for $12.8 million bond that we had, I thought it'd be a good idea that, in the way that I was told that the way these, impact fees are applicable is when there's an excess of use of our facilities. And in this case, we're expanding the elementary school. So maybe it would be time to re-implement the impact fee. And I'm hoping you're hearing all this. I'm sorry,
We're good.
I'm
We're good.
away. Oh,
We're
great,
good.
thanks. Yeah, so I just thought it was time. And I'm yeah, not sure what else to add.
Who determines the fee level?
So yeah, so what would happen going forward if you wanted to pursue this? We would work with a consultant who specializes in developing impact fees, who would update or maybe even recreate at this point justification and calculations for the fee. The impact fees have to be proportional. So you have to have a documented justification that says for each new home, based on population numbers and numbers of people per household, we expect each new home to add an average of 1.7 children to the school district or whatever that number is, and then justify the amount that they pay based on that. There is a report from, I think it's 2003, that the previous impact fee was based on. The person who wrote that, Bruce Mayberry, he did a lot of impact fee work in the state. He has since retired. There's one or two consultants who do a lot of that now, that kind of taken over. And they do those calculations, they justify it, they do a study, and then the planning board would review that, consider it, hold a public hearing, and decide whether or not to implement it. And then it would apply to any new, when someone pulls a building permit, they sign something that says what impact fees are being assessed, and then they pay it at the time of the occupancy permit.
What's the rationale of an impact fee versus just assessing it as a part of the regular tax revenue process? Like why even?
So the idea is that when new people are adding new residences, new dwelling units, that they are increasing the needs for capacity for different services. That there's a direct connection between them building a new house, and it's a one-time fee. So them adding that new residence means that forever there are going to be more people living in that house that are going to be using more town services. So it's a one-time fee to get our services up to that additional capacity.
We have so many classrooms, we have so many desks.
Mm-hmm.
It correlates with how many bedrooms you have, basically. And so when you add new, it's.
I see what you're saying.
I'm fine.
I think we should move forward with a study.
Go ahead, Matt.
I had some perspective to that. Just my experience in the 6 years of built on White Rock, and so I was all excited. I said, "Oh, good! There's another 10 or 11 or $12,000 in additional tax base to the town." Well, then somebody told me, "Well, as long as they're kids." Because each child is $16,137, and that's an arbitrary number. Don't quote me on that, but which has an impact on the town tax base. So even though there have been 12,000 additional taxes, there was an impact of anywhere from $14,000 to $16,000 in another child going to school, and that's if there was one child. If there was two or three or even more, there was an impact. So it's kind of one of the things I was a little enlightened to as becoming a selectman. I thought, oh, great, new homes, new tax base, but as long as they don't have kids, But anyways, that was kind of my theory behind this. With the expansion, the elementary school, I thought this might be an opportunity for us to offset some of that tax base. It says my internet connection is unstable. Hopefully, you're still hearing me. Like I said, I'm away right now, but it would be to offset some of this cost we as taxpayers we're trying to absorb.
It's a stencil on every house, not by a kid.
Correct.
It's
yeah.
on new
It's on the
homes,
house.
new homes.
On new homes. And some of it is probably even some number of bedrooms,
So
right?
sometimes it's a formula based, you pay a different amount based on the number of bedrooms, sometimes it's square footage. Sometimes it's flat for the type of house.
I think it's worth at least exploring and getting.
So I do know when we discontinued it, which the board had to vote to discontinue in 2016.
Yep.
You know, what I remember is we needed to because we were no longer paying for the additional space, the additional need is why we needed to discontinue.
I think the other thing that would be worth understanding is, because we asked some of these questions in the CIP committee,
Okay.
but to go and ask the school board to put together an analysis to see if, based off of that addition to the elementary, if they're seeing a potential impact as soon as those kids grow up into the middle school. Is there going to be a need for an addition for the middle school? And what the outlook impact is as those class sizes continue through the
Yeah,
rest
that's
of the
actually
school.
what I was thinking, when you said it was discontinued, I would think that the town would think a justification would be, we are proactively planning for capital improvements, and we have a fund for when we have to expand the school, and any new home has to contribute to that
So
fund.
they have to be spent within, I want to say six years. So it's not a long term, and they have to be returned if they're not spent within
Yeah.
the appropriate amount of time, and that's the tract. So
But I think
when
that's
you have
my,
a bond payment, it's really easy.
Yeah,
They
right.
just-
I think my point to that though is they're doing studies, right? And they're understanding, and so we're doing this expansion to the elementary school. What I would like to hear from the school board is, do they see a potential impact in a 4-year period to the middle school, where those kids are now growing and moving over into the middle school, and now there's
Well,
gonna
it'll probably move, because how long is this bond for?
30 years.
be.
If we implement this, it can stay for 30 years, type of thing. So yes, that's gonna
Is it 30
happen.
years? I know the high school one was 20.
Good.
I'm, like I said, I'd support it for an assessment of it.
What action do we have to take to?
I'm hearing,
A motion or a vote or?
if you want to do that, that'd be great, but I'm hearing a consensus, but if somebody wants to make a motion to move forward with the study,
Impact fee study.
that'd be great.
I'll make a motion to move forward with the impact fee study to address the implementation of the impact fee
Specifically for schools.
for schools.
Second.
For the elementary. school.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? There
I
we
will
go.
just say, I worked for the town of Salem before I came here, and there were a number of different impact fees for recreation, roads, traffic, public safety, schools. We had all of them. And I looked at what it costs for a new single family home in impact fees. It was almost $10,000. And they also
Not a
have-
great way to encourage development, but.
But
I mean,
But
it's
it
not a
doesn't-
great way to.
it
to-
doesn't restrict it though at this point. Um,
Another 10
But,
grand.
well, I mean,
How much, residential do you want to encourage? I mean, it's coming. I mean, it's, we try to encourage business, because, my business, that $30,000 I paid last year in property taxes cost the town, fire and police protection. my house, you know, I mean, now my kids are done and out of school, but when I was paying, you know, $7,000 and getting, you know, $30,000 worth of education, which tax dollars you want?
Yeah, kids have to be upside down. The cost.
Yeah. That's the, yeah,
Literally.
yeah,
Businesses are right.
yeah.
All right, thanks for joining us. South Carolina, I think.
He liked my call.
So I will work on, I've already reached out to the consultant who seems to be the go-to person for this. We'll get a proposal from him and I'll work with.
And that is with the planning board, public hearing. Yeah.
So I will need to work with the town manager on funding and try to find out how much this study's gonna cost. We will look into it.
All right, so we get correspondence and other business. Did you have any good read? You're just
I came for
for the entertainment?
yeah.
Okay. I mean, if you really enjoy yourself, there is a vacant spot.
So,
The amendments in.
Hey, some comments. I think we're probably already at it.
I don't know what they were, but we incorporated that. Oh, yeah, so we added comments and we added that it was via.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Very good. That's all I have.
I remember being surprised too.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of December 21st, 2023.
Second.
Favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? You get minutes. But you can't leave.
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor? We are